In the autumn of 1834, Pine Hollow was a place where nothing ever happened. Nestled between dense Kentucky woodland and a slow-moving tributary of the Green River, the settlement held fewer than 100 souls. It was a quiet farming community, tight-knit, God-fearing, suspicious of outsiders, and deeply protective of its own. People there measured time not in hours, but in harvests. They marked life by baptisms, marriages, and funerals. And for years, funerals had come too often. The deaths were not violent. They were not dramatic. They were simply sudden. A farmer would fall ill after supper and never rise from his bed. A widow would collapse during Sunday prayer. A landowner would retire early, complaining of fatigue, only to be found cold by morning. The town doctor, Elijah Boone, wrote the same phrase again and again in his small leather-bound ledger: natural causes. It was the only explanation anyone could offer, until the Morrison twins began to speak. Eleanor and Abigail Morrison were born in the spring of 1825, identical in every way except temperament. Eleanor was quiet and watchful. Abigail was direct and unafraid. Their father, Thomas Morrison, was a modest mill worker who had moved his family to Pine Hollow 3 years before the events that would make the girls infamous. The family attended church regularly. They kept to themselves. They were neither wealthy nor influential. In short, they were ordinary. Until the winter night Abigail began to scream. It was December 14th, 1834. Snow pressed heavily against the cabin roof when Abigail awoke in terror, shaking violently. According to her mother's later account, the girl pointed toward the darkness and said, "He is under the white tree." When pressed, she described a man with soil in his mouth and blood soaking into his collar. "He cannot breathe," she said. "They put him there." Her parents dismissed it as a nightmare. But the following morning, Eleanor quietly added a detail. "There are 10 more." Within days, the girls began naming names. Not neighbors, not distant relatives, but townsfolk who had died in the previous 6 years. Matthew Corbin, the land surveyor; Ruth Halstead, the church seamstress; Daniel Price, who owned 3 parcels of riverfront property, and others, 11 in total. All had died suddenly. All had left behind estates that had later changed hands. When asked how they knew these things, Eleanor said simply, "They told us." Abigail elaborated, "They come at night. They say we must help." At first, the townspeople treated it as childish imagination, but something changed when Abigail led her father and 2 neighbors into the woods beyond Miller's Field. She stopped beside a large sycamore tree bleached pale by lightning years earlier. "He is here," she said. The men dug. 4 feet down, they struck fabric. By nightfall, they uncovered the remains of Matthew Corbin, who had supposedly died peacefully in his sleep and been buried in the churchyard. The grave in the cemetery was later opened. It was empty. The town did not sleep that night. Reverend Silas Greer demanded a full review of burial records. Dr. Boone's ledger was retrieved and examined under lamplight in the church vestry. Every one of the 11 named individuals had died without autopsy. Every one had been declared natural causes, and nearly all had revised their wills within weeks of their deaths. In most cases, property or land had been transferred to distant relatives or sold at unusually low prices. One name appeared repeatedly in the legal documentation: Edwin Hallbrook.
Edwin Halbrook was Pine Hollow's most prosperous citizen. He owned the general store, controlled the grain supply contracts, and funded the construction of the new church steeple just 3 years earlier. He was respected, admired, untouchable. His wealth had grown steadily during the same period in which the mysterious deaths had occurred. But wealth alone proved nothing. What unsettled the town was the twins' next revelation.
On January 3rd, 1835, Abigail told her father that the victims had shown her the black powder. Eleanor clarified, "It is mixed in cider." The girls described symptoms consistent across all 11 deaths: sudden dizziness, weakness in the limbs, a burning sensation in the throat. Dr. Boone, pale and sweating, realized the implications. The description matched arsenic poisoning. At the time, arsenic was common, used in rat poison and various medicinal compounds. It left few visible traces after burial, unless one knew where to look. Despite protests from several town elders, the bodies were exhumed. Samples of hair and soil were sent by courier to Louisville for chemical analysis, a rare and controversial decision for such a small community. The results arrived weeks later. Elevated arsenic levels were detected in 7 of the 11 remains. The other 4 had decomposed too extensively for conclusive testing. It was enough. The sheriff was summoned. Edwin Halbrook denied everything. He claimed coincidence. He claimed jealousy. He claimed hysteria stirred by superstitious children. He pointed out that no one had seen him administer poison. He reminded the town of his donations, his generosity, his contributions. And yet, the girls continued to speak. They described a small ledger hidden beneath floorboards in Halbrook's study. Inside, they said, were columns of names and amounts, figures corresponding to land acquisitions. A search warrant was issued. The ledger was found exactly where they described. The trial took place in April 1835. It drew spectators from neighboring counties. The prosecution built its case on circumstantial evidence, financial gain, chemical findings, the hidden ledger. Witnesses who recalled Halbrook personally delivering cider to several of the deceased in the days before their deaths. But the most controversial testimony came from the Morrison twins themselves. The defense objected repeatedly, arguing that spectral visions were inadmissible. The judge agreed partially. The girls could describe what they knew, but not how they claimed to know it. When asked directly how they learned of the graves, Eleanor responded calmly, "We listened." The courtroom fell silent. After 3 days of deliberation, Edwin Halbrook was found guilty on 7 counts of murder. He was sentenced to hang. The execution took place on May 22, 1835. Records indicate that Halbrook maintained his innocence until the final moment. His last words, according to one witness, were, "You will all answer for this." The Morrison twins never again claimed to see the dead. Their visions stopped as abruptly as they had begun. They lived quiet lives thereafter, marrying farmers in neighboring counties and raising families of their own. Neither gave interviews in later years. Neither wrote memoirs. But Pine Hollow was never the same. The church steeple funded by Halbrook was dismantled. Dr. Boone resigned. Several families relocated entirely, unable to bear the shame or suspicion lingering over the settlement. And for decades, travelers passing through would ask about the twins. Some called them blessed. Others called them cursed. Modern historians remain divided. Some argue the twins overheard adult conversations about irregular wills and suspected foul play. Others suggest subtle prompting from authority figures may have shaped their testimony. Skeptics point to coincidence and confirmation bias. Believers point to the sycamore tree, the empty grave, the hidden ledger, and the precise locations of bodies no one else could find. No documented explanation has fully accounted for how two 9-year-old girls identified 11 victims, burial sites, and concealed evidence without error. The sycamore where the first body was found still stands, weathered, hollowed, its bark pale against the dark Kentucky soil. Locals say nothing grows beneath it. Whether that is true or not depends on who you ask. But the story endures, a reminder that sometimes justice does not arrive through investigation. Sometimes it arrives through children who claim the dead are whispering, and sometimes the whispers are right.